Respect is not shouted, it is imposed in silence. Whoever needs to raise their voice has already lost authority before opening their mouth. True strength is not measured in decibels, but in the calmness with which you hold your gaze, in the firmness with which you set a limit, and in the consistency with which you live every word you say. In everyday life, we see many who confuse respect with fear. They intimidate, they get upset, they raise their voice to pretend dominance, but in reality they only reveal insecurity. Authentic respect does not come from the fear you generate in others, but from the security you transmit from within. Nobody follows someone who screams out of desperation, but everyone listens to the one who keeps silence firmly. This video does not seek to give you hollow formulas, but to show you how self-control, discipline, and consistency become invisible weapons that transform your presence. Here you will learn that silence can be your best response, that calmness disarms more than anger, and that clear boundaries do not need explanations. There are 8 lessons that you can apply in any real situation. At work, at home, on the street, with strangers or with the closest people. 8 attitudes that will make you not have to demand respect because you provoke it naturally. Stay, because in the end, you will understand that the strongest voice is the one that does not need to be raised. 1. Turn silence into your best response. Silence is like an invisible wall. It can't be seen, but it stops any onslaught. Think of a river flowing forcefully. The more stones you throw at it, the more noise it makes. But when the water calms down, the reflection becomes so clear that even the aggressor is confronted with their own image. That's how silence works when you use it intelligently, not as evasion, but as strategy. Most people believe that imposing oneself means speaking louder, responding quickly, or having the last word. However, when someone attacks and you respond with calm and silence, you achieve something that disarms. The other person is exposed to their own noise. Avoiding immediate reaction is an art that requires discipline. When someone provokes you with an unfair criticism or a hurtful comment, the first thing that arises is the impulse to defend yourself. That impulse is natural. But if you follow it, you enter the other person's territory, and right there you lose control. The practical advice is to stop for 3 seconds before speaking, breathe, and ask yourself, is it worth responding now? Another important aspect is to understand that silence is not submission. It's not about keeping quiet because you have nothing to say, but about showing that you don't need to expend energy on what doesn't contribute to you. One way to practice it is to consciously choose when to speak in everyday discussions. For example, if at work someone accuses you without reason, your first reaction might be to want to justify yourself. Instead, try staying silent, maintaining eye contact, and waiting. Often silence makes the other person realize the absurdity of their stance, and if they don't, your serenity will show that you're not on the defensive, which generates immediate respect. Silence is also useful in social situations where someone tries to provoke you in front of others. A mockery, an irony, or a sarcastic comment can be diffused without you saying a word. Your calm attitude, a slight smile, or simply not reacting shows that you're above that game. Whoever observes you understands that you don't need to prove anything. That control communicates more than any aggressive reply. To practice this skill, one piece of advice is to train active listening. Instead of thinking about how to respond quickly, focus on fully listening to the other person. By doing so, not only do you gain time to think, but you also convey that you value your balance more than a useless confrontation. And when you finally speak, your voice sounds firmer, clearer, and much more impactful than the one who didn't stop shouting. Another way to use silence to your advantage is in conversations where you feel someone is trying to manipulate you. In the face of malicious questions or judgments disguised as concern, silence can be the most powerful response. You don't need long explanations or justifications, because each justification is a ground that the other person will use to wear you down. Silence, on the other hand, is a shield. Ultimately, turning silence into your best response means understanding that not everything deserves your voice. It means learning to measure which battles are worthy of words and which are won with the calm of not reacting. When you apply it, not only do you avoid falling into emotional traps, but you also place yourself in a position of dominance. Real authority is not heard in shouts. It is perceived in the serenity of someone who knows when to speak and when not to. And there lies the lesson: whoever masters silence masters the scene. 2. Keep calm and respond with dignity. A volcano does not lose respect because it is silent. On the contrary, its calm imposes more than any explosion. Everyone knows that if it were to awaken, its force would be unstoppable, and that certainty is enough for no one to underestimate it. Such is the calm in the midst of confrontation. It is not weakness. It is absolute control of yourself. When someone provokes you, hoping that you lose balance, the most powerful thing you can do is to stand firm, speak calmly, and show that nothing and no one has the power to take you out of your center. Most people fall into the trap of responding with anger when they are attacked, because they believe that this is how they defend themselves. The truth is that every time you raise your voice, you show that the other person managed to touch you. That is not authority, it is reaction. True respect is earned when you manage to keep calm at the moment where everyone expects you to explode. That moment defines whether others perceive you as someone reliable and strong, or as someone dominated by their impulsivity. How to practice this in everyday life? First, you must learn to recognize the signal from your own body. When you feel that anger rises, that your heart beats faster, or that your voice trembles, that is the signal to stop. Breathe deeply and remember that you do not have to prove anything. A useful technique is to lower your voice tone instead of raising it. When you speak slower and lower, you force the other to listen to you attentively and convey that you are not in a hurry or anxious. That calm becomes a silent message of dominance. Another practical tip is to change the way you think about the situation. If someone provokes you, instead of seeing it as a personal attack, see it as a test of your self-control. Transform the confrontation into training. Every time you manage to respond without losing your calm, you strengthen your leadership capacity and build a respect that is not obtained with shouts. Whoever maintains dignity, even when they try to humiliate him, projects a security that cannot be faked. Dignity is also in the form of your words. You don't need to insult, you don't need to disqualify, just be direct and clear. If someone unjustly accuses you, respond with facts, not emotions. If someone tries to manipulate you with irony, respond with a short and firm phrase that closes the intention without falling into their game. The key is that your response makes it clear that you are not someone who can be dragged along. In work environments, for example, keeping calm sets you apart from the rest. Imagine a meeting where someone contradicts you with bad intentions. If you raise your voice, you lose credibility. But if you maintain control, look at the other person calmly and respond with solid arguments, everyone will notice who really has the authority. That dignity in your way of acting will be remembered more than any high-sounding word. It is also important not to confuse calm with indifference. It's not about enduring everything without saying anything, but about responding without losing your balance. The difference is that your response comes from reason and not from emotion. Practice it in difficult conversations with close people. If someone reproaches you with a high tone, don't imitate them. Listen, keep your voice steady, and respond clearly. That contrast makes it clear who has control of themselves. In short, keeping calm and responding with dignity is to show that nothing external defines your reaction. Your power is in that you decide how to respond, and you never give that decision to another. 3. Disarm with questions that reveal the truth. A flashlight in the dark doesn't need to shout to be noticed. It simply illuminates and exposes what was hidden. That's how questions work when someone tries to manipulate or impose on you. Instead of responding with anger or justifying yourself, it's enough to ask the right question, and suddenly the scenario changes. The other person is forced to look at themselves in the light they didn't expect. There is no more powerful defense than forcing someone to explain their own contradiction. Discussions often get tangled because both parties seek to have the last word. One accuses, the other responds, and so the tension escalates uncontrollably. But when you decide to respond with a question, you break that cycle immediately. You don't enter the confrontation game, but you turn the conversation into a mirror where the other person sees themselves. And the most interesting thing is that you achieve this without raising your voice, without offending, without belittling yourself. How is this applied in everyday life? Imagine someone throws a sarcastic comment at you to ridicule you. The common response would be to defend or counterattack. You, on the other hand, can ask, "What are you trying to achieve with that comment?" Suddenly, the weight of the situation is no longer on you, but on the other person. Now it's them who must justify what they said. That simple strategy changes the terrain of the conversation. Another example, if someone questions your decisions with contempt, instead of getting angry, you can ask, "What would you do in my place?" That question forces them to reason instead of attack. And even if they don't give you a clear answer, you have already achieved the important thing, breaking their intention to belittle you. Authority comes from not letting yourself be dragged into emotion, but from driving the interaction towards reflection. A practical tip is to prepare a mental list of questions that reveal truths without sounding aggressive. Some can be, "Why do you think that's fair? What does respect mean to you in this situation? How does that attitude help solve the problem?" These questions are not meant to humiliate, but to expose. And when someone doesn't have solid arguments, the silence that follows your question becomes your victory. It is also important the tone with which you ask. It should not sound ironic or mocking, because in that case you would lose the strength of the strategy. Your voice should be calm, even curious, as if you really wanted to understand. That calmness disconcerts anyone who expected an outburst of anger. Not getting the reaction they were looking for, their power disappears, and they are trapped in the obligation to explain. When a friend, partner, or family member tries to manipulate you with guilt or reproaches, you don't need to enter an endless circle of justifications. It's enough to ask, "What exactly do you expect from me?" That simple phrase forces clarity and cuts off the emotional game. What seemed like an emotional attack becomes a conversation with boundaries. The most powerful thing about this attitude is that you not only disarm the other person, but you project intelligence and self-control. You don't fall into the role of victim or aggressor. You stay in the center with the calmness of someone who knows they don't need to prove anything. And that image is engraved in the minds of others, that of someone who responds with light instead of noise. Ultimately, disarming with questions that reveal the truth means using clarity as your greatest defense. You don't gain respect by shouting louder, but by showing that you are capable of exposing the hidden with few words. 4. Draw clear boundaries and uphold them without explanations. A wall doesn't need signs to announce that it can't be crossed. Its mere presence makes it clear. It doesn't argue, it doesn't justify, it doesn't try to convince. It's simply there, and anyone who approaches understands the message. That's how your boundaries should be: firm, visible, and consistently upheld, without the need to embellish them with lengthy explanations. When you start justifying every decision, you give room for others to question your authority, and little by little, you lose ground in your own life. The people who inspire the most respect are not those who talk a lot about what they tolerate or don't tolerate, but those who act clearly. If you decide that you won't accept disrespect, your consistent reaction in that moment speaks louder than 100 warnings. The common mistake is to fall into the trap of over-explaining, of trying to make the other person understand why you set a limit. The truth is that not everyone wants to understand you, some just want to negotiate your dignity. How does this apply in everyday life? Start by defining within yourself what is non-negotiable. It could be your time, your peace, your personal space, or the way you address others. Once you have that ground clear, every time someone tries to invade it, respond with simple and firm actions. For example, if someone insists on speaking to you sarcastically, you don't need to give a speech, just distance yourself and don't feed that interaction. Over time, the person understands that this attitude doesn't work with you. A practical tip is to learn to say no without accompanying it with excuses. If you don't want to attend a commitment, say it firmly, and that's it. You don't have to detail your reasons or convince anyone that your priorities are valid. Each extra justification is an invitation for others to try to bend you. A firm and serene no is enough. This simplicity communicates respect because it makes it clear that you know what you want and you're not seeking approval. It's also important to remember that a boundary is not announced, it's upheld. You can say many times that you won't tolerate certain behaviors, but if you end up giving in, what you're conveying is weakness. Respect is built when your word aligns with your actions. If someone crosses your boundary and you allow it, you send the message that your rules are negotiable. That's why the key is to act consistently without the need for endless explanations. In the workplace, drawing boundaries can mean not allowing your time to be abused. If your boss or colleagues try to load tasks on you that don't belong to you, instead of justifying yourself with 1,000 excuses, it's enough to respond, "That's not possible for me at this time." It's a direct, polite and clear response that leaves little room for pressure. Respect comes from clarity, not justification. In personal relationships, setting clear boundaries is also vital. If someone close resorts to emotional manipulation to make you do something you don't want, the mistake would be to engage in lengthy discussions to make them understand your point of view. A better strategy is to stand firm in your decision, even if the other person doesn't approve. This consistency shows that your dignity doesn't depend on convincing anyone. In short, drawing clear boundaries and upholding them without explanations is one of the most powerful ways to command respect. You don't need to shout, you don't need to justify yourself, just act consistently. The boundary is not just a barrier for others, it's a reminder to yourself of what you're worth and what you'll never allow. 5. Show your worth without having to say it. Fire doesn't announce that it burns, it simply does. Its heat speaks louder than any warning. The same happens with people who know their worth. They don't seek to proclaim it. They don't need to repeat it in every conversation because the consistency of their actions screams louder than their words. The paradox is that those who constantly try to convince the world of their importance are the ones who lack it the most, while those who live in silence, firm in their character, end up commanding respect without asking for it. The mistake of many is to try to impress with empty speeches. They claim to be loyal, strong, or disciplined, but in practice they fail in the simplest things. The truth is that when you have to announce who you are, your credibility is already worn out. There's no need to repeat that you are reliable if your word is fulfilled. There's no need to declare that you're brave if, when difficulty comes, you maintain control. Your real value is not in what you say, but in what you do when no one is watching. In everyday life, this is reflected in small details that in the long run build a solid image. Being punctual shows respect, fulfilling your commitments reveals discipline, treating with courtesy without losing firmness conveys character. Every gesture speaks for you. The key is to understand that respect is not demanded, it is provoked with consistency and authenticity. A practical way to apply this lesson is to let time be your endorsement. Anyone can pretend to be strong for a few days, but only consistency over months and years demonstrates real greatness. Work in silence, meet your goals without the need for applause, remain true to your principles in any environment. That consistency builds a prestige impossible to buy with words. Another important point is to learn to let go of the need for recognition. Wanting everyone to validate you only makes you a slave to their opinions. Your worth does not depend on applause. It depends on your ability to remain whole when no one applauds. Do the right thing even if no one notices, because in the end, authentic respect is born from that internal security. When you live like this, you project a silent strength that imposes without needing to impose itself. In the workplace, this attitude is even more evident. There's no need to repeat how much you contribute. Your results speak for you. When you work with excellence and serenity, when you maintain composure under pressure, people recognize your leadership even without naming it. On the other hand, those who fill their mouths with merits but do not back them up with facts end up losing authority. The same happens in personal relationships. The person who does not boast about what they do, but lives with dignity and consistency, inspires trust. That wordless security generates a deeper respect than any speech. You don't need to prove your worth. Your presence reflects it every time you choose to act from integrity. To practice this every day, focus on congruence. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you promise respect, value it in every interaction. If you talk about discipline, let it show in your routine. Little by little, others will understand that your character is not sustained by phrases, but by deeds. In conclusion, to show your worth without having to say it is to live in such a way that your essence imposes itself. Your actions become the strongest testimony, your consistency the best defense, and your perseverance the foundation of the respect you inspire. Because in the end, the one who is really worth it doesn't need to announce it, their whole life demonstrates it. 6. Use humor to diffuse tension. The tightest rope can break with an unexpected vibration, and humor acts exactly like that in the midst of conflict. It's like a light spark that cuts through the stiffness of the atmosphere, transforming a tense moment into a manageable one. It's not about laughing at everything or trivializing the serious, but about using emotional intelligence to turn a confrontation into a scenario where your serenity is evident. Whoever knows how to use humor at the right moment not only protects their calm, but also commands respect, because it shows that there is no situation capable of stealing their control. The common mistake is to think that humor is frivolity. Many believe that smiling or responding with wit in the midst of a difficult situation is a sign of weakness, when in reality, it is the opposite. It takes more strength to not be dragged down by anger and respond lightly than to shout. Well-used humor is not evasion, it's strategy, a way of telling the world that you're so confident in yourself that nothing can bend your spirit. How does this apply in everyday life? Start by identifying the moments where tension is about to explode. An argument at work, a malicious criticism, a sarcastic comment. Instead of reacting with offense, you can drop a short and humorous response that disarms the situation. For example, if someone accuses you of something exaggerated, you could respond calmly and with slight irony. "Wow, I didn't know I had so much power." That small dose of humor breaks the cycle of attack and defense. Another practical tip is to use humor as a bridge, not as a weapon. It's not about ridiculing the other person, because that would only fuel the conflict. The key is to redirect the energy towards neutral ground. Suppose that in a meeting, someone tries to pressure you aggressively. A witty response like, "Calm down, we're not in a boxing ring yet," can soften the atmosphere and show that you don't lose your composure. Laughter, even light, reduces hostility. It's also important to learn to use humor with yourself. The ability to laugh at your own mistakes generates respect because it shows maturity. If you make a mistake and someone tries to use it against you, A self-critical response like, "You're right, I'm human, what a disappointment," neutralizes the attack instantly. Whoever doesn't let themselves be humiliated because they laugh at themselves becomes untouchable. That attitude shows strength and prevents others from trying to hurt you for your weaknesses. Humor also has a psychological effect on others. When you make someone smile in the midst of a tense atmosphere, you create common ground where confrontation loses strength. People tend to respect more those who bring calm and lightness in difficult moments. That skill makes you a natural leader because everyone prefers to follow someone who transforms tension into clarity. To train this attitude, observe your environment closely and practice witty responses without aggression. It's not about memorizing jokes, but about learning to see the light angle of each situation. Over time, your mind gets used to finding smart ways out instead of being dragged down by anger. That training turns humor into an automatic reflex that protects your calm. In short, using humor to diffuse tension is to show that you have an inner mastery that does not depend on what happens outside. It's choosing a serene smile instead of an impulsive scream, a witty word instead of an insult. 7. Learn to end conversations firmly. A door left ajar always invites someone to try to enter, even if they have no right. The same happens with conversations that you don't know how to end. You leave an open space for manipulation, criticism, or disrespect to continue creeping into your life. Learning to close a dialogue firmly is not rudeness, it's protection. It's the conscious act of saying, "This is as far as we go," without shouting, without explaining too much, but with the certainty that your time and energy are not free ground for anyone. The common mistake is to believe that prolonging a complicated conversation helps to solve it. Many people, in an attempt to look good, allow useless discussions, dead-end debates, or endless reproaches to drag on. But all they achieve is to wear themselves out and give more power to the one who seeks to control the exchange. Respect is born when the other person understands that with you, there is no room for detours or unnecessary entanglements. And that lesson is taught by closing the dialogue at the right time. How does this apply in everyday life? The first key is to detect when a conversation no longer has a purpose. If someone repeats the same reproach over and over again, if the discussion goes in circles, if the words no longer seek to understand but to impose, that is the moment to put a stop to it. Instead of continuing to justify yourself, you can use simple and firm phrases like, "I've already answered that, I won't keep repeating it," or "This conversation is not progressing, I prefer to leave it here." You don't need to shout. A calm but determined tone communicates more than any emotion-laden word. A practical tip is to prepare closing responses that help you cut to the chase. Some useful phrases are, "I understand your point, but I've already made my decision. I'm not willing to continue with this tone. If you want, we can talk at another time, not now." These expressions convey clarity and close the door to manipulation without leaving room for new justifications. The key is not to fall into the trap of explaining too much, because each explanation opens another door for the other person to try to pressure you. In work situations, knowing how to end conversations can save you unnecessary conflicts. Imagine a colleague insists on discussing a topic that has already been resolved. If you continue debating, you will lose time and energy. But if you respond calmly, "The issue is already defined, I have nothing more to add," you set a clear boundary. That firmness not only commands respect, it also shows professionalism. Whoever knows how to close dialogues conveys leadership. Personally, ending conversations firmly also protects your balance. There are people who seek to wear you out emotionally, who prolong discussions so that you end up giving in out of fatigue. When you learn to say, "I will not talk about this anymore," and you keep your word, you break the cycle. At first, it may bother the other person, but over time they will learn that the game of prolonging the unnecessary does not work with you. In conclusion, learning to end conversations firmly is an act of respect towards yourself. It means valuing your energy and not letting others wear it down in useless dialogues. It's a way of telling the world that your time is valuable, that your attention is not wasted, and that your inner peace is non-negotiable. Whoever masters this art projects a natural authority because they show that they don't need to prolong anything to be heard. 8. Make your mere presence command respect. A lighthouse does not chase after ships, it does not shout its light or beg to be seen, it simply stands firm on the coast and its mere presence guides and protects. Such should be your presence in life, an energy so clear and solid that others perceive it without you needing to utter a word. The most powerful respect does not come from what you say, but from what you convey when you enter a room, how you walk, how you hold your gaze, and how your calm fills the space effortlessly. Many people believe that respect is earned with endless speeches or demonstrations of strength. However, what impacts the most is silent consistency. There is no need to raise your voice or impose attention, because real authority is projected with the confidence of those who do not seek approval. Your posture, your tone of voice, your way of listening, even your way of being silent, are signals that communicate more than any phrase. The difference between someone who inspires respect and someone who asks for it is that the former provokes it effortlessly, while the latter pursues it without reaching it. How do you build a presence that commands respect? Start with personal discipline. The body speaks before the mouth. And if you do not take care of your posture, your expression, and your way of moving, you will hardly be able to project confidence. Walk upright, with a firm but serene step. Do not lower your gaze or move anxiously, because these gestures send messages of insecurity. Maintain eye contact without aggression, like someone who has nothing to hide or fear. That simple attitude generates an immediate impact on how others perceive you. Another key aspect is the consistency between what you say and what you do. People respect those who fulfill what they promise and stand firm in their principles. If your presence conveys trust but your actions contradict you, sooner or later you will lose credibility. On the other hand, when your words and actions go hand in hand, your mere image inspires authority. It is this consistency that makes others take you seriously, even before you speak. In everyday situations, firm presence is noticed in the small details. When you enter a room and greet calmly, when you listen without interrupting, when you do not get upset even though the atmosphere is charged, others feel that there is a different energy with you. You do not need to show off or prove anything, because your attitude already makes the difference. It is a respect that is not begged for, it is provoked with authenticity. A practical tip is to work on your conscious silence. Learn to be present without the need to fill spaces with unnecessary words. Silence, when accompanied by firmness, conveys more than an entire speech. People respect those who know how to be silent without seeming uncomfortable, because that reflects self-control. Practice staying calm in the midst of noise, and you will see how your mere presence begins to change the atmosphere. You should also remember that commanding respect does not mean generating fear. Authentic authority does not come from fear, but from the silent admiration that your balance arouses. Those who feel confident in themselves do not need to crush anyone, just to stand firm in their essence. That confidence is contagious and establishes a natural order around you. Ultimately, making your mere presence command respect is not a matter of external force, but of internal mastery. It is the sum of your posture, your silence, your consistency, and your serenity that makes others recognize you as someone with real weight. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.